France has dispatched more police to the Overseas Department of New Caledonia, the Pacific island, under curfew, as the government seeks a compromise over an electoral reform which indigenous separatists say will dilute the pro-independence vote. Now, the government's trying to seek a compromise, the Prime Minister stating that the President can wait before putting any reform to a joint session of the French Parliament. There were ugly scenes that were witnessed during the day. Overnight, the curfew firmly in place. For more, let's cross to Birmingham. Nathalie Mrgudovic is lecturer at Aston University. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Good evening.
We remember in the 1980s when those who were loyalists and separatists clashed, sometimes in a deadly fashion. Is this a return to those days?
Well, you could fear that, and some people in New Caledonia especially are talking about a return of these bloody events from the 80s. However, we can still remain optimistic, and Macron seems to recognize that pushing, like he has been doing since 2021, since the third referendum on self-determination, he seems to understand that actually that was not the right method. And maybe he will understand that actually reestablishing the dialogue, but I mean a real constructive dialogue led by trusted people from both sides is the only way forward now in order to reestablish peace and eventually dialogue.
What kind of prospects for the days to come after the looting and violence we've seen?
Yeah, well, the National Assembly in France is voting tonight, on this bill on the constitutional reform to introduce a new legislation or an enlargement of the voters for the provincial elections, reducing the amount of time you should have spent in New Caledonia in order to be entitled to vote at the provincial election. The discussion now is on justifying 10 years of residency in New Caledonia, and that is not acceptable by the pro-independence movements and parties. So that's one thing, this vote tonight. This vote was then supposed to be followed immediately or very soon by a special reunion by the Congress in France, when the two chambers in the parliament meet senators and deputies in order to pass a
joint session.
Exactly, a joint session. And that was supposed to take place very soon, but Macron has backed down on that one. And we haven't got a date now.
Nathalie Mrgudovic, back in 1984, it was also an electoral reform bill that lit the spark. What's changed? What's different this time?
Well, unfortunately, not much. That's the problem. You know, it seems like the 30 years or even more than 30 years since 1988, it seems like all the progress that has been achieved since then with the accord of Matignon-Oudinot in 88 and of Noumea in 98, 88 and 98, it seems like all that has been completely brushed away from the third referendum on self-determination in 2021. So the same problem, who is entitled to vote in New Caledonia for the provincial election in particular, which then lead to the composition of the Congress, local Congress, Caledonian Congress, which is like a parliament, if you want. And it's a main issue.
It's the main issue. What has also perhaps changed is the strategic importance of New Caledonia. It sits on the world's third largest nickel deposits, nickel, which is an essential component for all the batteries we're going to need for our green transition. How does that change the equation?
Well, the equation is the same. Nickel has always been there, and
but it's more strategic, right, than it was before even.
No, maybe it's a little bit more strategic now, but the government doesn't seem to, the French government, I mean, not the Caledonian one, doesn't seem to really focus so much on that issue right now. Of course, they are focusing on the management of the resources and the fact that the New Caledonian government has had difficulties to actually ensure a proper management of the different factories in the north and in the south of New Caledonia. But I wouldn't say that this is really the crucial element in the negotiation, in the tensions at the moment.
Are other Pacific players staying out of it? I'm thinking most notably of the likes of China and Australia.
Well, China has no say because it's a French territory still. So no possibility to approach and try to develop the strategies that they are developing in the rest of the South Pacific, especially in Vanuatu, for example, in Papua New Guinea, or in the Solomon Islands. But Australia carefully stay aside for the moment, doesn't say, is more on the French side because remember that there was a big issue a few years ago when we were supposed to sell submarines to Australia, and at the last minute the contract was ripped off to the benefit of the Americans. And so Australia has always had, especially now with Albanese, a will to demonstrate more cooperation and open-mindedness and will to collaborate further with France. So at the moment, they won't take much position on the issue.
One final question for you, Nathalie Mrgudovic. You're saying that it's going to be a tense couple of hours and days still.
Oh, more than that, I would say even weeks. Because honestly, there is one thing that is going to appease the situation in New Caledonia, and that is to send a mission, a dialogue mission, or a special mission, if you want to call it now, that the pro-independents are calling for, have been calling for quite a few weeks and months now. And for example, the former Prime Minister in France, Edouard Philippe, he was really appreciated in New Caledonia by both sides and trusted. And he is now actually really considering pushing for this mission of dialogue, or waiting at least to be called to lead this mission of dialogue, which for me is the only solution to reestablish peace and dialogue. Even though Macron has called for the major politician in New Caledonia to come to Paris this weekend to discuss the situation, I don't think he is going to be able to repeat what Rocard did in 1988. So a special mission, I think, is the necessary option very, very, very soon.
Nathalie Mrgudovic, so many thanks for joining us from Birmingham, England.
My pleasure.